it's very difficult to make a living farming in America.
We think that the very best way to get your food is locally. It just turns out that that is extremely inconvenient depending on your zip code.
If we want to change farming in America, we need to look at the big systems, and we need to change it on every level. Transparency in food just universally is a good idea. On this little dot of land, we did this, and it is possible to do this anywhere.
John and Holly Arbuckle, welcome. Thank you for doing this. I understand you guys have been in the ranching business for many, many generations, I suppose. I saw 9 generations. When I read that, I was like, holy cow. I think that might be the longest ones I've ever heard of. I mean, I hear a lot of 4 or 5 generation, even some 7, but 9. When did that start? That's got to be somewhere in the early 1800s or something like that, if I'm not mistaken. I don't know. When did you get your family starting this stuff?
Well, for starters, we tell people that my family just hasn't been very creative. We just keep doing the same thing. We started ranching in America in 1732.
Wow, 1732.
Yeah,
before
we left
Scotland.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, it was before it was the United States. It's cool.
Yeah. We had family members that fought in the Revolution on both sides, and we had our first American-born generation before the Revolution. So anyway, we started in 1732, came from Scotland. We were actually ranching in Scotland. They didn't call it ranching, but we were raising mixed, grazing animals, sheep and cattle.
Right.
And there are no records. Nobody was keeping track, back then. Sure. So I don't know how far it goes back, but as long as there's been people, there's probably been Arbuckles farming.
Yeah. So you got to be, I assume you got to be on the East Coast somewhere, because I mean,
We are, and we have not spent the 10 generations. I'm the 9th generation. Holly and I's son and daughter, Noah and Zia, are the 10th generation. And it has been in many states, and that 10 generations we've lived in 2 or 3 different states.
I see.
Okay.
So
yeah, not all in the same spot.
So I don't know how old generation 10 is, but are they planning on following in your footsteps as well?
So Noah is 18 and Zia is 15, and we tell them that our family tradition is enjoying ourselves and living a healthy life in the countryside. And there is no expectation, that they do the same thing I did. They are free, unburdened to do whatever it is they want. And if that thing is farming, hooray. If that thing is computer science, then God bless them. They can do whatever they want. So time will tell what direction they choose, but we like to think our job as parents is to create a healthy home environment and then share with them a lot of the possibilities that life offers, and then their vocation should kind of rise to the surface with their passion.
Yeah, and I guess Holly, you must have you married into this, I suppose. I'm assuming maybe you didn't come from a 10 generation ranching or farming family, but how has that impacted your life? I mean, is this something you thought when you were a kid, boy, I want to grow up to be a farmer or a rancher?
No, I grew up in a rural area also. I'm from the Eastern Shore of Maryland, so a lot of farming, and actually the place that I grew up was a farm, but my family wasn't farming. A lot of watermen. And yeah, I think that I kind of stumbled into this. So we met when we were working at a school for environmental education, and John knew that he wanted to farm. That was in his DNA. I think it was almost like not a choice. He just wasn't doing it at that point, because he was also a wilderness guide and a raft guide and a mountaineer. And I'm an acupuncturist, so I was just getting started with that. And we got married and thought, we were going to settle down and grow food and, do healing. And our son, just to backtrack on our son, John's correct. They can do whatever they want. But our son is actually farming. He had his own meat CSA here on the farm last year. Unlike John, he is very good with mechanical things. John only likes it if it's alive. He's not really a tractor guy. I think that's fair to say, isn't it?
Very fair.
So, but that next generation can just teach themselves things through watching YouTube videos. So he, fixed our tractor. He watched videos and got friends together and fixed our tractor this past summer. I mean, he's very interested in following in the farming footsteps along with some other form of employment, because it's very difficult to make a living farming in America.
Yeah, and that's actually quite a shame to see that. To see, so many over the last 50 years, so many of them just kind of go under. Some of it has to do with the land being so expensive, and then just being bought up by commercial business interests, and then some of the consolidation that's happened, for sure. So that's a challenge. What do you guys actually farm specifically? I mean, you said you raise some animals. I don't know if you do a combination plants, animals. What do you guys do?
Yeah, so first and foremost, we're grass farmers,
Yeah, sure.
because the
Yeah.
production of grass as a person's focus in livestock production is going to, what do I want to call it? It's the secret sauce, it's the canary in the coal mine. It's what you really want to like focus on. When you are doing that well, then that's going to create additional margin, revenue, additional inventory that then you can become a good marketer. You can become good at a lot of things beyond that. So first and foremost, I'm a grass farmer. And then we export our grass in the form of meat. um, so we create beef, pork, chicken, and eggs. We also really like planting trees. I think we've planted about 500 fruit trees since we got here, and we make about 250,000 pounds of compost every winter. Um, yeah, that's what we raise. We also like to be very transparent in the fact that, the main thing that we do to keep the lights on is we make snack sticks. We do not make them on our property. The USDA makes that a very complicated process. So
Mhm.
we have that manufactured with a co-manufacturer. It's like a giant commercial kitchen kind of thing. And we started out raising 100% of the animals that went into our snack sticks. But as we grew, we've gotten more grocery stores saying yes. Our online presence has become more robust. We've been able to hire more people. The more we grow, the farm is still a finite size. So the farm didn't grow as fast as the grocery stores that said yes. So we buy, meat from a lot of other farmers. We just really like for people to know that it's not all coming from our farm. 5 years ago it did, but anymore we need to administer the business. We need to keep on talking to other farmers. We need to do a lot of things. So we buy meat from other farms also.
Yeah, it's in my understanding is one of the biggest trends recently is a huge increase in the demand for things like, meat-based snack sticks. I mean, they I think they're one of the most hot snacks that are out there right now. And obviously, there are a lot of snacks that are clearly unhealthy, and I think, obviously with meat in them as a principal ingredient, that certainly, in my view, makes for a good snack. What is the name of the snack company then? I guess I don't know.
Pastures.
What is it
And
called?
yeah, that is the meat. So John runs the farm and I run the brand.
What was the brand again? I'm sorry, I didn't hear it.
Singing pastures. So
Singing.
yep, singing like a song,
Okay.
and then pastures like grass, not
Okay.
like the minister.
Okay. So are you guys regionally in stores, or is it a national thing now? Where's your distribution at?
It's national.
Okay.
We started out living in the state of Missouri. In fact, we were in the state of Missouri until 8 years ago. And we have, how do I say this? We think that the very best way to get your food is locally, farmers
Mhm.
markets, local farmers. It just turns out that is extremely inconvenient depending on your zip code. The access, the availability. Do you want to spend all day on a Saturday while it rains getting, some carrots and eggs? There's other ways to get it, So we tried to be local and regional, and we actually found that it was in our area where we were in Missouri, it was very cumbersome. There wasn't a high priority placed on that. I didn't want to spend my whole life in my car driving to St. Louis or Kansas City. So we said, well, where does it never rain on Saturdays? It never rains on my website, So we put
Yeah.
one of those up. Um, and with that one step, we went from being hyper local, having chicken eggs and pork chops, ground beef and bacon on a little table at a Saturday farmers market. We went from being hyper local to having access in all 50 states. And it was great. So we started the business that way. We really found that we were able to gain traction in that way. And with that foundation under us, we decided to move to Maine. So had we started the business in Maine, there's a very high demand for local goods. People are really interested. They seek that out. So maybe it would have been a different story. But since it was, national when we got here, we just said, if it ain't broke, don't fix it. And we kept running forward with that.
So we're in Sprouts nationwide, and we sell at Thrive Market, Misfits Market, some of the online vendors. And then we're going to be going into Whole Foods this year, and likely regionally, and likely Costco regionally.
Oh, well, congratulations. That's obviously huge. And then obviously you got to figure out how to keep the demand filled. I guess that's the problem when you're able to scale rapidly. Like you said, you got to go buy a new farm, get more people to help you, and those types of things. How did you decide to go into that, by the way? What was because obviously, is 100% of the cow turning into a beef stick? Because it seems like, what do you do with the rest of the meat? Obviously the sticks usually come from the kind of that, I don't want to call them offcuts, but you don't turn ribeyes into beef sticks typically. Hey folks, it's Dr. ShawnBaker here. Hey, if you or someone you love is suffering from chronic disease and you're tired of just managing symptoms with potions, pills, and procedures, I want you to check out Revero.com. Our team of dedicated professionals is committed to tackling the root cause of your issue and finally getting you healthy. Hurry up, though. Our spaces are filling up very quickly.
Right. Exactly. So if you turn the whole cow into beef sticks, you'd have a really expensive beef stick. It'd be like a $10 beef stick. So we take for one thing, we do this more with pigs because we're a little bit more hands-on with the pigs. With the cows, we're able to work with farmers groups where we can simply, request the trim, a certain lean trim cut in a certain way from a certain part of the cow, frozen, cryovac, it ships to the place that we manufacture. With the pigs, what we really want to do is balance the carcass. And in that regard, a lot of the middle meats are more valuable. So we take like the bacon, the chops, the tenderloin, the baby back ribs, the spare ribs, a lot of those things. Historically, in the past, we've gotten those things to like frozen meat box delivery services, local like nose to tail butcher shops. And then what we'll take, after Christmas, there's less demand for hams. And then we'll take that part. We can take parts of the shoulder assembly, components from the shoulder. We can turn all that stuff, into snack sticks. So, sure. Yeah, go ahead.
I was going to ask, so do you guys have, I know some companies, I've seen, Epic Bar and some of these others will have specific animal cuts, A lot of people, it's a blend, they'll mix beef and pork together, and there's some people who don't eat pork. And how do you guys deal with that? Do you guys have these are beef sticks, these are pork sticks, the casing, because sometimes the casing is a problem. How do you guys deal with that?
So the casings are collagen casings, and that's pretty universal in, their beef collagen casing. We started out with pasture-raised pork because at the time there were lots of grass-fed beef sticks and there weren't any pasture-raised pork sticks. So that's where we started with it. And recently we've added grass-fed beef sticks. I think the thing that was the bigger, so we just do we don't do any mixed, like pork beef mixed. The thing that was really different is when John was saying, when we started, and you started to ask us how we got started doing this. So I just wanted to backtrack to that question for a second. So our first farm was in Missouri, and John was doing the farmer's market thing in restaurants. And I was also working as an acupuncturist. And he came back from one of these food shows one day, because we were active in food and ag even then, and said, there's lots of grass-fed beef, but no pasture-raised pork. So the first place that we started making meat sticks was about 35 minutes away from where we lived. And it was a smokehouse called Westerns. And it was owned by Kevin Western and his wife, who we knew. And it was pretty small at the time. And we did some test runs there, and they were making meat sticks, but they use encapsulated acids and liquid smoke. So encapsulated acid is like a partially hydrogenated oil that goes around the acid. so that as you're cooking it, that like with all partially hydrogenated oils, which are artificial trans fats. The point of them was to be able to stay in a solid form longer, right? Like that's why we put it in cookies and crackers and everything. So it stays solid longer, and then it melts into the meat. And the whole thing gets mixed in. It's like a bunch of teeny tiny little BBs. It's probably about a teaspoon per pound of meat. So it was that, then liquid smoke. And so because I was a practicing acupuncturist, even though it didn't show up on the nutrient deck, it doesn't show up. The trans fats weren't showing up because it's less than half a gram per stick. It didn't show up, but I knew it was in there. And so I had decided that I wasn't cool with that, because you're supposed to say I would feel good about giving this to my own kids. And in my opinion, the right amount of artificial trans fats in your diet is 0. So we moved to a plant that did fermentation and slow smoking. So it takes about twice as long as encapsulated acids. So that was a big differentiator for what we do. And then we just rebranded and changed our website. Excuse me, we are changing our website, but we changed the recipe in the last. We just relaunched in August, but we've added bone broth and grass-fed beef collagen to all the sticks. So those are some things that we're doing that to make it different than what is out there already.
What about the liquid smoke aspect? Because you said a lot of them have liquid smoke. Is that something you guys forgo, or what's the deal on liquid smoke?
We don't need it, because the fermentation and slow cooking, slow smoking with real hickory wood, those would have been the ways that we preserved food for a very long time. So most of the leading brands, so can I say the leading brands? Most of the leading brands like Chomps and Archer all use encapsulated acid and liquid smoke. Okay. The other way to make a snack stick is to use fermentation and slow cooking or slow smoking. So because the process is twice as long, we don't need to use liquid smoke. I mean, liquid smoke isn't great. It's not the worst thing in the world, but the reason they need to use it, it's, you pour it into the meat, and the reason you need to use it is that the cook time is a lot shorter. And there are other brands that do fermentation and slow cooking. Vermont Smoke and Cure does, Paleo Valley does. There are a lot of smaller brands that do it. The thing that we're doing right now that is different even from those brands is we decided to increase the protein by adding a pure form of protein with the bone broth and grass-fed collagen powder. Does that make sense?
Yeah, no, it's interesting. I didn't realize, all the details that go into some of this stuff. So what do the macronutrient profiles look like on your bar compared to, because, and I'll be honest, I mean, I like having some fat in the meat because it just tastes better. And I think it's, I think you can't be too lean or it's not that enjoyable. But what are your macronutrients looking like on the bar? If you said, how much protein, how much fat, so on and so forth, carbohydrate.
So just to be clear, I'm totally with you. I really enjoy some fat in what I eat. That's like the vehicle for passing flavor. And also, just for me, I kind of gravitate towards protein and fat. I don't have our sticks are pretty low in fat, so, but I kind of gravitate towards it in the course of the day. If I was going to live on snack sticks, you might not get enough, but luckily we've got other things we can put in. So, our macros for our beef sticks are 10 grams of protein, 1 gram of carb, 1 gram of fat.
And 90 calories.
90 calories.
Or is it 80? I think it's 80.
And so they're a good source of protein for sure.
Yeah, absolutely. We can fill in with all the other stuff, as the day goes on. But if I'm trying to hit, close to my body weight, my target body weight in grams of protein, that's where I really have to strive. I have to kind of work to avoid some carbs, and then I have to work to limit the fat that I'm intaking. But, getting to the body weight's, worth of protein, that's usually where I push.
Yeah. So I guess you could eat 20 of those and to get to 200 grams and get for 1,800 calories or something like that. That'd be a lot. So that's, that would be a lot to eat one day for sure. What about you? I want to go back up to one thing you said. You said you grow fruit trees and you make a lot of compost.
Yeah.
I mean, are you using the fruit for, fruit for people to eat, or is it turning into pig food, or what is going on with the fruit?
So this is where farming gets a little bit like philosophical. When you're farming, it oftentimes takes more than one human generation to really deeply and intimately understand your land. And sometimes when you're planning for the future, you're planning for 30 years in the future, 50 years in the future. I know farmers that have a 200-year succession plan, for what they hope their land is doing and moving towards, their definition of perfection. So when I plant trees, I'm preparing for an unknown future. I'm preparing for, I don't know who's going to be caring for them. I'm probably not going to be caring for them in 50 years. That'd make me 100. Maybe I'll be a very spry 100-year-old pruning my fruit trees. But perhaps our children will take it over. Perhaps people that I don't know will take it over. But it's just part of my nature to want to grow things. So I'm going to keep on planting trees and mowing around them and composting them and just caring for them. I just really want to care for them almost as much as I want the fruit. The caring for the land is, I really want to do that. If we get 500 trees just rocking it and producing fruit, like, I'm going to let somebody else worry about that. I just want to take care of living things.
Yeah, interesting there. And you mentioned, who's going to be doing this after you, or someone, maybe your kids, maybe somebody else. What is your perception on, just with recent events? I mean, obviously there's a lot of attention on agriculture, the beef sector. I mean, in the political news, tariffs, imports. What is your impression on the difficulty level of farming and ranching today versus 5 years ago, 10 years ago, whatever time frame you want to look at? Is the outlook looking better, worse? What are your thoughts?
I'm sure Holly wants to speak to this one also. Holly and I just we have different mindsets, different ways of approaching, questions like this. And that's, healthy, it creates balance. We can average ourselves out. So I'll give my answer first, and then we'll make space for Holly to answer in her way. I put a lot of emphasis just on personal responsibility of an individual. I think that most of the problems in my life are usually, in a business sense or any sense, are usually self-created. Mm-hmm. And I'm going to go out on a limb and say that in many instances, our biggest problems in farming are that I would like to see farmers be better business people. I'd like to see them understand their cost of goods sold, their break-even points, the amount of money that they're willing to dedicate towards marketing. What is it that they're going to do to increase not just their revenue, but their margin? Do they have a business coach? So I start within the individual to answer that question, because we're always going to have external headwinds and challenges, like the weather, the political climate, whatever, like you just got to step up to that. And I think that I choose to solve a lot of these problems internally. So I don't think very hard about the political climate.
Okay.
Holly, up to you.
John said earlier a quote about, he mentioned something about like farming and farming locally, and it depends on what zip code you're in. And I think that's a quote from Will Harris, actually, from White Oak Pastures. And I think that that's true. If you are someplace that has velocity and a premium price point, then go for it and you can make it. When we started making meat sticks, it was to have an additional income stream. And the real turning point was, for me, was somebody who was working for Farm to Consumer Legal Defense Fund was visiting us. And I said we were having just a really hard time making it. And she said that makes sense because 85% of income on small farms in America comes from off farm. Mm-hmm. So he's working, she's working, whatever combination of the family. So even before tariffs, even before, all of this stuff, this would have been like 2016 that she told me that. And that was a real aha moment for me, because it's like, it's not that we're doing something wrong. It's that this is just the way that it is. So in my opinion, I think for one, we need to be really honest with young people getting into farming. And we need to say, because I think that there's a tendency with farmers to expect a lot from them and be overly romantic about, you can do it. Come on, you can do it. Like, just pick it up. And that's great, but you have to be able, if you want to be green, you got to be in the black. We can't be encouraging people to go into farming unless we can make sure that they can make a living. Because I've seen a lot of people get hurt. They go on, just get hurt like emotionally from the stress. So, the suicide rates with farming, right? Like there is a huge loss when you lose your farm and you lose your land because it's your whole identity. It's different than losing your job, right? So I just think that we really need to pay attention to that, because the reality is, by the numbers, if you take away the story, most of the food in America is coming from California and the Midwest, period, right? Like we're in New England. I have a beautiful small farm. It's awesome. But I'm also very realistic that if we want to change farming in America, we need to look at the big systems, and we need to change it on every level. I mean, and I know that you've talked about regenerative agriculture on your show before. I mean, there are simple things we can do like cover crops and things like that. We got to start doing the things that make sense, that are wide, that can be applied to millions of acres, and not just, even though we're big proponents of small local agriculture and buy from your local farmer, we also need to make big agricultural changes at the same time, because we're not going to change the food system in America fast enough, for what we need to do with soil, just by focusing on little family farms like ours. So that's kind of controversial that I say, but I think that there's a lot that needs to be done, and
absolutely.
reasonably quickly.
Well, yeah, I don't find it that controversial personally, because I've been talking to ranchers for years and years, and I've talked to Will and about most of the people you might know in the regenerative space, or a lot of them at least, that are fairly popular. And yeah, the reality is, the food system isn't going to change overnight dramatically. I mean, it's going to be a slow transformation. It's going to go some direction, and one of the things is, if you look at like the commercial feedlot system, most of those cows come from small ranches. I mean, there's a few big places like Harris Ranch out in California, but there's a lot of little mom and pops, 50 head of cattle. And to me, it's just like, well, that makes sense that, you could do the cow calf part, in a regenerative fashion. That makes sense. Why not just kind of encourage people and facilitate that through either government assistance or whatever it might be to do that, because that's gonna help maintain the soil, and then you can still finish them, because a lot of people prefer fatter meat. I mean, that's just the reality. I mean, some people, and it's more consistent. We know we've got this USDA system where I think 85% of our meat now comes out choice or prime, which is huge. I mean, it used to not be that way, and so then you got this guy on a regenerative thing, and his meat's too lean or it doesn't taste good, and it's a harder thing to do, I think. And so, I mean, not that you can. I've tasted some really good stuff from regenerative, truly grass finished farms. I mean, but it's harder to do, as you guys probably may know, as far as the skill level. It's not that it's necessarily more cost expensive. You can, I think some guys like Joel Salatin and some of these other guys, Greg Judy, talking about how you can make it cost effective, and you can multi-species graze and that type of stuff. And it sounds like that. Is that kind of what you guys are doing there with pigs in the running around in the fruit trees? I'm assuming, and I'm guessing, but I don't know.
Yes, I want to point something out, though, is that there are two things going on there. One is how you raise the animal. So Greg Judy, who we know, Joel Salatin, who we know, all of these guys, right? Because it's actually kind of small community. Like, one is how you make it, and they're doing it the very best way. And the other is what's your market? Because those guys, like Missouri is actually a pretty big beef state. But the guys that we know that are like the dentist down the road that's running cows, if his only choice really is to take it to the sale barn, right? So it's having a market of people. Like, if you have a good website, or you're in an area, you're in the Washington, D.C. metro area, or you're in New York City, right? And you've got the volume of people that can pay a high price point, and you've got those marketing skills, and you can sell direct to consumer, you can do that. But there are two levers going on there. And I just want to point that out, that you can have really, really good farmers that none of us have ever heard of, who are excellent farmers, in Missouri and other places that we've been, but they're not good marketers, right? So,
Absolutely.
Yeah. So I just wanted to kind of tease that out. And then in terms of like what do we do about it? Like that is a tricky question, because there are a lot of different views on how we change agriculture. One of the things I think we need to do though is be realistic, is that right now if you look at food trends, and I love local farmers markets, but we're not seeing more and more people go to the farmers market. We're seeing more and more people buy online is the reality. I mean, after COVID, I think that the rates of people shopping for food online just skyrocketed, and they dialed back a little bit since then, but not a lot. So I think that we actually need, we need communities of people to help and be supportive around farms to help them find those markets. Because somebody who's a really good farmer is not necessarily really good at designing a logo on a website.
Yeah, I mean, there's analogies in medicine. A lot of people go into medicine and they go work for a corporation because they don't have to deal with the business side. It's like, let me just do my doctor thing. And a lot of people have done it. And some people regret that, quite honestly, because the corporate stuff has gone in a weird direction. But when I'm just wondering about costs and economies of scale. Like if you're selling direct to consumer online, is it more expensive to do it that because you got to ship? Obviously, you got the shipping costs and sometimes I don't know what your shipping failure rate is, a couple percent where they screw up the delivery or something like that. But how does that compare to selling directly locally? Is it more expensive to sell directly locally, or is it become? And I'm sure there's a break-even threshold point where once the scale hits a certain amount, it's cheaper to do it this way. Can you talk about those dynamics?
To me, it's more in a long-term sense. It's a lot more cost-effective to start something like a local regional meat box delivery company if we wanted to push, the local regional thing. I think that the number of people willing to go to a farmer's market will, in most zip codes, never reach a farmer's financial goals. If farming is a middle class occupation that should create a middle class lifestyle, the ability to have health insurance, send your kids to college, pay your mortgage, and retire one day. I can think of very few farmers markets that will enable you to do that. Now, there are some, and the ones that totally rock it. And I'm a big fan of all of them. But first off, when young people approach me and say, hey, I want to quit my corporate job that pays a lot of money and become a farmer, I'm going to be honest, I try to talk them out of it. And if they take issue with me trying to talk them out of it, and they really want to get in my face and tell me that they're going to do it, then I think to myself, this person actually has a chance. I kind of appreciate that. But I mean, back to your question, what direction are we going to take farming? The more things are online, the more that I see small farmers deciding that they're going to have a local or regional meat box delivery element of their operation. But wholesaling in a cost-effective way is really going to be, if we want to encourage regenerative agriculture in America, it's going to be supporting regenerative agriculture in a wholesale sense. Because right now, the USDA website says that 1% of food in America changes hands locally, which means direct to the consumer within 200 miles of its point of production, right? And in the last 20 years, local has got the concept of local has gotten tons of passion and funding and brilliant minds working on it. And all of that has gotten us to, 1%, So to me, I really want to support the 99% that are farm families wanting to be regenerative, wanting to create nutrient dense, healthy food, but not having the skill set to administer a website or, all the associated skills that are going to make that more sophisticated business profitable. Does that make sense?
No, absolutely. Absolutely. Let me just shift gears a little bit, get your thoughts on a couple things that have been made the news lately. I mean, well, they've been talked about for years now, but seem to have come to a head a little bit. People talking about, country origin labeling laws, and the Prime, Thomas Massey has a Prime Act that he's been pushing for years, unsuccessfully, unfortunately. And it really has to do with processing access, I think, in many ways. And then of course, being able to sell interstate, interstate without the USDA. Can we get away with state processing facilities and still produce a good product and ship it to, from Maine to New Hampshire or something like that? So, what are your thoughts on those sort of issues?
I'll say mine, and then I will make space for Holly to say hers, if that's okay. So in the state of Missouri, the difference between the meat safety regulation book for the state level and the federal level? Not
personally, but I'm sure it's fairly similar, I'd guess, but I don't know, maybe not.
One has a blue cover and one has a red cover.
Yeah.
So if you're following state, guess what? You're following federal, and I'm sure that there's a few more hoops that you have to jump through. In our region, meat processing plants can jump through an extra hoop, not get the federal inspection, but in some cases, they're able to export, meat to our surrounding states. So anyway, do I think I have been to some meat plants that I'm like, these guys need to get their butts kicked by an auditor. So I appreciate the auditing process. I appreciate what the USDA does. I think they fill a valuable role. And that said, in many cases, the state requirements are the exact same as national. Your second question was about country of origin. I am not entirely aware of what the Beef Association is doing with the American beef inventory relative to rainfall issues in the western states. But I don't know what they're doing, but it doesn't look like they're increasing our domestic inventory deliberately for reasons I don't understand as fast as would be necessary to match the demand for beef. So when something weird at some weird national political happens that's largely above my visibility, I am aware of importation. Australia, Paraguay, Argentina. I would love to support domestic American farmers like my father. My father was an American beef producer. I would love to support that. But for a lot of Americans, they just simply won't have access to $20 a pound hamburger unless we build our inventory back up, our domestic inventory. So I'm totally fine with the importation of meat so long as you don't pass it off. You don't say made in America, or on your website, you don't have a picture of, some celebrity farm and make everybody think you got it from them when you're actually getting it from Paraguay. So anyway, I'm fine with imports so long as you don't try to trick everybody and make them think that it's, and like I said earlier, we're not raising all the beef, like our farm is on our website because we live here and we take pictures and, that's on there. But I really want everybody to know that we are not raising all the beef and pork that go into our snack sticks.
Is all the beef you raise in the U.S., or are you importing it from Australia and stuff like that as well?
Yeah, no, we're excited. Everybody in the meat industry is importing from Australia right now. Mm-hmm. And we have some opportunity to do that. We'll be getting beef from America also. But until the American beef inventory gets a little bit more accessible, like we've kind of painted ourselves into a corner in terms of domestic beef pricing. And I'd love for that to change. The moment that changes, we will stop buying from Australia.
For grass-fed beef.
Yeah, and just also to be clear, it's 100% grass-fed, never tasted grain. The way that Australia and New Zealand, got into the position that they are is that all the soybean growers, unions and lobbyists or whatever you call them, the same thing with corn, like they just haven't had to overcome this grain-fed issue that we are either blessed or cursed with in America. Like all their genetics are set for gaining weight and body mass on a high forage diet. All of their production and everything, the mindset is all geared around producing on grass. And as a result of that, there's like 10,000 successful grass-fed beef producers in Australia, and they're able to create that without the Corn Growers Association breathing down their neck and making artificial obstacles for them to overcome.
Yeah, fair enough. That's an interesting insight. Fair enough. And, as you mentioned, the herd side in the U.S. is down to like 1950s historic levels, the lowest we've been in, 70 years or something like that. And it doesn't bounce back overnight. As you know, it takes a couple of years to produce a cow. And
Yeah.
Particularly when the financial incentives aren't there, when everybody's trying to, for a while, everybody was trying to sell them because they were getting a lot of money for them. And now I think that maybe that issue is going the other way, unfortunately, for a lot of the ranchers. But there is clearly a lot of people interested. And like you, I mean, I like to be able to eat cheese from France. And, some people like, maybe they want to get a steak from Japan or Argentina or some of these other cuts that they are curious about. But I mean, it is nice to know, hey, this was raised and I'm supporting a local guy. And I think the consumers will make the choice. And I don't know how many of them will make the choice. I mean, some will, a small percentage. I mean, most people go to the store and they purchase based on what it tastes like and how much it costs, and anything else they could care less about, right? So, I mean, that's a reality.
That's what I was going to say, is that I absolutely think we should have country of origin labeling. And I think everybody I know does, because right now, I mean, Gen Z looks into everything, right? And they want to know the story behind things. And so transparency in food just universally is a good idea, right? And people are interested in sub-ingredients now that they didn't used to be interested in. I mean, people want to know more about their food, and we should do that. So that is, I think, an easy question. It's a no-brainer. We should just tell people where the food is from. The other question is what you just said. Like, most people are making food decisions based on price and taste and health also, right? Like, they want to, but price and taste are probably the top two. So I'm not sure that the country of origin labels are going to be a quick fix, right, for helping the American. I think the American agricultural system needs a lot of help, because it took a very long time for us to transition everything to feedlots and make it so all those small farmers in the Midwest that sell, they almost have no choice but to go to the sale barn, right? Like, you raise the cows and now you got to do something with them, and they need to be working another job just to be able to have the privilege to farm, because we've already talked about that. So, so long as we've set up a system where we've made it very difficult for some of these farmers to expand and get that kind of scaling going, I think that you just can't blame people when they go and they're going to look for meat and they're looking for what they can get at the grocery store, that's on sale.
Yeah, I don't know that the local Safeway, Alberts, whatever chain, Kroger or whatever it might be, I know you guys probably have something similar out in Maine, is going to necessarily put a big advertising effort into this is raised fully in the U.S. I mean, I think it's, maybe they will, maybe they'll have an incentive to do that, but I think their incentive is just to get people to buy as much food as possible, and doesn't matter where it comes from. And some of the stuff that brings people in there is obviously, if I can save $3 a pound on my hamburger, many people are going to likely pick that one, I suppose.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, no, it's exciting stuff. Like, for a long time we were single source. I raised every bit of the meat, that we were putting into our snack sticks. And we just, we were successful enough in sales, in part because of my wonderful wife being good at what she does and us just knocking on a lot of doors. We got enough yeses that, several years ago, we stopped being single source. And I will say this: as soon as the American grass-fed beef inventory, as soon as everybody really gets it together and they can offer, good quality, good quantity, reasonable price, man, we are so excited to get back to that.
Well, 90% of the grass-fed beef in the United States is coming from abroad.
Yeah,
I mean,
sure.
the supply chains aren't there right now. And I think that what you're pointing to is, how do we fix it? And country of origin labeling is a good idea. Making it so people can sell across state lines with state USDA processing is a good idea. And we need like 10 other good ideas, right? It's silver buckshot, not a silver bullet.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, like I said, there's probably a whole host of things, and as like Will Harris will say, and I've talked to Will a few times. It's like what he has available to him down in Bluffton, Georgia, as far as just the land is not maybe available to some guy in, southeastern or southwestern Arizona. I mean, it's just different solutions for different scenarios, and they're not all the same. And
Right.
I think that's a reality that a lot of people don't sort of comprehend. And I'm not, like I said, I'm not a farmer, I'm not a rancher, but I've talked to enough that I at least have a little bit of insight on this stuff. And I certainly appreciate what anybody that feeds us does. I think you guys are heroes and underappreciated heroes, and hopefully you continue to have success. And I guess the reality is, like, your success, you only have so much land. I mean, you just, it's like, unless you decide I'm going to buy up all the neighbors' land and stuff like that, like maybe some companies end up doing, perhaps. But I mean, it's like there's a point where, like, you've probably maxed out the capacity on your land or close to it. Is that fair to say?
We could get a higher stocking rate on our place. If we had an army of children, then we'd have a labor force for it. But yeah, we have some room to grow. The far corners of the property where it's hard to run water lines to in the summer, or where water lines freeze easily in the winter. We can get some more animals into the woods. We just haven't done that, recently.
But I think the thing that's important about at least like what we're doing is, like, I'm not going to change the whole food system, right? It's not about me getting bigger. It's about being a point of inspiration for what's possible. So when we bought this farm, we were in Missouri for about 8 years. And we bought the farm that we're at now in 2018. And it was an overgrazed dairy farm. And if you know anything about dairy, it was the very last type of farming to consolidate and go to like more of a factory farming model, because basically you have to have the cows be so relaxed that they can give milk, right? So you can't stress them out. So what happened in the Midwest and in New England is dairy got really, really hard. And even in 2018, when we were looking at buying this land, the guy that was showing it to us said that he was getting the same milk prices from the commodity truck that came around that they got in the 1970s, but everything else had gotten more expensive, right? And that's because California and Nevada, were finally figured out how to create 3,000 and 8,000 cow dairies, right? And put them on cut up tires, and they never see the outdoors, but they're not stressed. They're not in a, they're pretty comfortable, I think, as far as I can tell. But it's a very different way. But what happened to this farm prior to us owning it was that they kept putting on more cows and more cows because they're trying to keep up and they're trying to increase their efficiencies. And it got terrifically overgrazed. So much so that when John and I moved in and took over the farm in 2018, a biologist came here and said it was some of the worst land that he had ever seen in Maine, which was a very discouraging day. So here's the encouraging thing. When you change management, things change very quickly. So now here we are in 2025. We have spent almost 8 years on this farm, and John and my son doing most of the farming. I'm mostly behind the computer these days. But the land, the soil has improved. We're doing monitoring on grassland bird populations, and we've had doubling rates of our bobolink population, and that's by a third party that's coming in. And you can see the changes that are happening. There are places the soil was so bad it didn't even grow grass when we moved here, that are now full and lush. So the really wonderful thing that I think regenerative agriculture may be, in my opinion, one of the most important issues of our time. Like, whether people believe or don't believe in global warming and what their thoughts are about carbon and things like that, the reality is that it is undeniable that with regenerative agriculture, you're holding on to your topsoil. There's less erosion, right? You're making the food gets more nutritious. There are all these fantastic changes that are happening. So you can look at a little place like ours and see what it was like then, and 8 years later, what it's like now. And the people who are out there doing it, Will Harris and Joel and all the other guys, right? Like, and small farmers all over the country that are doing that, they are improving. They're taking the risk and they're putting the extra energy and the money into making sure that happens. And I think we need to find a way to reward people for the effort that they personally put in, because everybody benefits. And right now it's free to pollute, right? Like, you can pollute and it's not necessarily illegal, and you can do pretty devastating things to your local watershed and it's not necessarily illegal. And we never hold we don't necessarily hold those people or those corporations responsible. So, but I think it's going to take more systematically to change things than just individuals trying to do the right thing. I think we do need different laws and we need a different structure. And in the meantime, people can come see farms like ours and other farms where they've improved the land. And I feel like that's kind of what we can offer in terms of like what we can in the movement is like, say, like, look, like on this little dot of land, we did this, and it is possible to do this anywhere.
Yeah. And the story that she just told about improving the land, for example, there were several fields when we got here that were just like cracked blocks of mud. Like grass didn't grow. There were like little like stunted like thorn bushes that were actually poisonous that were coming up in between the cracks. It was like a barren wasteland. It was like a lunar landscape. And that's the beauty of regeneration. And like so often we hear in the media, like there's all these examples of how human beings are damaging the earth, and many of those stories are true, but I feel like they kind of like stall out there, like the human capacity to live on the earth in the same way that beavers live on the earth. They definitely affect their ecosystem, but they make it more diverse and vibrant at the same time. Like that's my goal for American farmers. Is how do we make our ecosystems and watersheds more diverse and vibrant and just full of life? And honestly, it's really going to be the reason that appropriately grazed livestock will always be more environmentally sustainable than vegetable production or grain production, because all of those things are going to involve tilling up the soil, releasing carbon into the atmosphere, the use of lots of petroleum. It's very difficult to find a field that is exclusively based in tillage agriculture that's actually healing the ecosystem. It just looks like a flash flood washed through. So this is part of my bias. Why I'm so excited about appropriately grazed livestock is I believe that we will heal ecosystems with livestock so infinitely faster than anybody's doing with vegetables.
Well, and I think maybe I don't know, you can tell me what's inspired you to, but I mean I mentioned you said like the bird population doubled over your pastures over probably that period of time. Maybe that name Singing Pastures comes from the songbirds. I'm guessing. I don't know, maybe not, but I mean, is that what inspired the name, or where did that come from?
Pretty close. So we like to just say that we're blessed to live in a reasonably intact ecosystem. And reasonably intact ecosystem means we've got some large predators, we've got big coyotes, we've got bobcats, great horned owls. We hear red-tailed hawks, crying when they're out hunting. We have bullfrogs in the ponds that are singing. There's all kinds of animals. There's crickets and, all kinds of things at nighttime humming. And the sound never stops. It's the opposite of Rachel Carlson's book, Silent Spring. We're the opposite of a silent spring. We are a singing pasture or a singing field or prairie or whatever you want to call it. But we are just so brimming with life that it's always singing. That's where we got the name.
Yeah, I mean, it's like when I was a kid, I remember driving around through the country, and you couldn't get 10 miles down the road without your car windshield being covered with dead bugs. Mm-hmm. And nowadays you can drive for 100 miles and you hit one bug. And I mean, I think that I don't think I'm imagining it. I think we've actually pesticide, insecticided ourselves so much over the last 50 years that it's changed the ecosystem dramatically. Am I imagining that?
Oh, I don't know, but I don't think so.
Yeah, and if you go into the middle of a cornfield, it's going to be pretty quiet, right? Mm-hmm. It's not full of life. And I would add, so the idea of the singing pastures is that every living thing has a voice, and John mentioned a lot of the wildlife. I think that would be true even if you go down to like different species of plants and microbiome, if I could get, a little out there, that everything has a unique vibration and is offering like its song into the world. And when you have that diversity, that's when it's all coming together, right? And it's a symphony. And that's what we want. That, and essentially, is what part of what it creates a healthy, holistic ecosystem.
Well, that's an awesome way to end this. We're coming up on time. So remind us once again, I think you said Sprouts, maybe coming into Whole Foods, a few other places. What's the website, name of the product again?
So Singing Pastures is singingpastures.com is the website, is the best place to go. And what was
Yeah, go to Singing Pastures right now. We're in Sprouts, Misfits Market, and Thrive Market. That's where we're at right now for a national crowd. And in February, we'll be in Costco in New England. And in September of 26, we'll be in Whole Foods in the Northeast.
And we're just Meat Sticks Online. If you live near us, you can get local meat and you can get local eggs and other local things. But as far as national sales, it's craft meat sticks. So they're fermented, slow smoked, and they have added bone broth and collagen.
Yeah. If you live close by, come over. We'll take you on a farm tour. We'll show you around. We've got pasture raised, organic chicken eggs. We've got all kinds of frozen cuts of meat. It's all USDA federally inspected. Happy to share with you in that capacity if you're local.
And that's what part of Maine? Are you near a town in Maine?
We're mid-coast. We're about an hour and a half north of Portland, Maine.
Okay. Well, awesome. Well, thank you guys for doing this. Appreciate it. And good luck to you. And next time I'm in Sprouts, I'll be looking out for your product for sure. All right.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Have a great day.